How we doing this morning? I didn't hear you. How we doing this morning? ProMat 2023. Let's go. A little round of applause, huh? Welcome to Chicago, the Windy City, but it's not because of the wind, it's because of the politicians. This is a very, very corrupt city. We've got 3 governors in jail, and I think Blagojevich tried to sell Obama's seat. So just hold on to your wallet, keep your head down, you'll be fine. All right, so this morning we're going to talk about one of our very, very, very good clients, Ecentria. Anybody out there an outdoor sportsman? Okay. Anybody like shooting guns? Okay. So I can't wait for you guys to hear this story. When I walked through that warehouse, I literally was in awe. Like, I'll take one of those. Oh, I love that scope. Oh, that's really cool. Very, very cool stuff in this warehouse. So we're going to talk a little bit about how you can actually optimize the warehouse with automation. We're going to talk about how we perform the storage type analysis, and then also a distribution network analysis. What's interesting, Chris is going to tell us a little bit, they actually had an AMR pick module in place. It wasn't working, and they actually pulled it out to hit their volumes, and now we've got the right solution moving forward. So we're going to hear a little bit about Ecentria. We're going to hear the problem that we were attempting to solve. You got to have goals and metrics of success for every project you do. You got to make sure you get that ROI. The approach we took, we started with a storage type analysis, automation evaluation, and then we also talked about, all right, today we've got 2 DCs. Do we do a single DC? Do we do 2 DCs? What's the right answer based on cost, size, transportation cost, as well as service windows? And then we'll talk about the next steps. So for those of you that don't know me, my name is Michael Woolwin, 30-plus year supply chain veteran, born right here in Chicago, 8 blocks from Wrigley Field. That makes me a Northsider. Don't hold it against me for your Southsiders in the house. And then in addition to me, you're going to hear from Dan Wazowski. Dan, you want to do a quick intro?
Good morning, everybody. My name is, I got to stand up. I don't like to sit down.
Do it.
My name is Dan Wazowski. I started with Conveyor Solutions over 26 years ago. I started there as a CAD drafter, worked my way up through there. I did design, applications, estimating, even did some installs, some service work. Currently, I'm the Vice President of Corporate Accounts. Chris?
Okay. All right, I'm Chris Batt. I've been with Ecentria for a little bit over 2 years now, but I've been doing distribution for over 30 years. Started when I was 12 years old, so I aged well. So to move on here, Ecentria is for the purveyors of gear, right? So we sell everything outside. We don't sell the gun, but we sell everything for it. We sell ammunition. We sell and stock anything from a rooftop camper to a little screw that you can put in to a trigger. So our challenge is, well, I guess I can keep talking about Ecentria. So Ecentria's been around for over 20 years. We had originally 3 buildings. We consolidated them into 2. We have one in Utah, one in Aurora here locally. And then we didn't know what we needed to do. We knew that we needed to look at our data. We did not have the bandwidth within our own organization. That's why we reached out to Alpine. So I've worked with Alpine before, previously at 3 different companies. This will be my 4th, along with Dan. I've known Dan and worked with Dan for over 20 years with Conveyor Solutions. So we brought them in. Like I said, we have over 300 people in our IT department, but we did not have the bandwidth. And Michael asked me last night, he said, what was the big awe, like when all this was done? And it was more of a confirmation that it came out what we thought it was going to be, but we just couldn't do it. We needed someone else. We needed a team of experts to find that data and work it. We would have got the same results, but it would have been another year from now, where they turned it around in months. And it really made us feel good because we knew that we had the problems, but we just couldn't prove it the way that they proved it as quickly as they proved it. So Michael also mentioned that we had some robots. We called them the Wallies. Automation is amazing, but you have to do the right automation for your building. We're in a lot of square feet right now. We want to maybe do 1 mega building or 2 mega buildings. We need to size them properly. Everyone here knows that rent is going up. So if you can vertically store it better, then you have less rent. It works out better. So I know I ad-libbed quite a bit here. I don't publicly speak a lot, but I think we're on the next slide here. Okay. out. Sorry about that.
No.
Oh,
All right.
all right.
So it's ironic that we walk into the facility, they just pulled automation out, and you think to yourself, okay, well, what's going on in the building? So one of the things that we always do is we start with the data, and then we leverage decades of experience to find the right solution. So anybody familiar with Pareto's analysis? What's Pareto's analysis? That's right. 80% of your volume should come from 20% of your SKUs. Guess what? Pareto's analysis doesn't work here. Actually, only 11% of their SKUs drive 80% of their volume. So what that really means is you better figure out how to solve the problem for those 11% or 13,800 SKUs. So that was number one aha. Number two, we got to look at seasonality and we got to look at peak days and peak data. So believe it or not, January is their busiest month, almost doubles their slowest month, 535 lines picked. But look at July. July is their peak anomaly. While the order volume is down, the quantity per line is way up. So, okay, now I've got to solve not a Pareto's law, 80-20 rule. I got to solve for 13,000 SKUs, and then I have a huge discrepancy. I could have as little as, call it 318,000 quantity going out, or 3.3. So this is a pretty unique environment, right? This isn't your typical right up the sweet spot, up the middle, right? Then let's look at the order profile. When you look at the order profile, how many orders can I pick directly into the outbound carton to minimize packing versus here, if I've got over 65% that are single line items, how can I batch those up? But I gotta take them to a pack station and I gotta pack them out, right? Can I get to some automation there? So these were some big ahas that I think Chris and his team kind of knew, and they were trying to make some changes in their building to get the volume out, and we actually helped validate that. Now, how many people in here think that their item dimensional data is 100% accurate? Yeah, that's what I thought. How many people think it's 50% accurate? Oh my gosh, okay, so yes, nobody's data is perfect. So what we do is we set realistic expectations. In this case, we said, all right, we've got about 80% of item dimensional data accurate. So we're gonna do something called proxy DIMS, based on manufacturer, category of item, other items. And then we put a trigger in there with a 999 knowing that it's a proxy DIM. Meaning that when we go to do the storage type analysis or the slotting or we move stuff, if we know that 80% will fit, 20% won't, we'll put it in a hospital lane and we'll look at it and go, yep, that was a proxy DIM, let's measure the item, and then on the next iteration, we'll find its perfect home. So we set the expectations, 8 out of 10 items are gonna fit, 2 out of the 10 aren't gonna fit because we didn't have good data, but we set the right expectations with Chris and the team. All right, now, when you talk about a storage type analysis to identify the ideal size and quantity of the forward pick location and the reserve, you have to come up with a rule of thumb. Do I want to replenish my A items once a week, once every 2 weeks, once every 3 weeks? So we work with the team, we did the iterations to determine the minimum number of replenishments, but knowing, remember, they've got some very fast moving items, so on your super A's, you might have to replenish it once a day. Okay, now, here's the key thing. When we talk about storage type analysis, we got to identify 2 types of growth. Number 1, how many SKUs are we going to add each year? And number 2, what's the overall volume? So we had a 20% volume growth year over year for the next 5 years, as you guys will see the analysis. All right, so we've got it, right? We've got the storage type analysis, we got the order profile, we know what the lines look like, we know our data. Let's see what we can do. So picture's worth 1,000 words. So we leverage a tool called Optricity. Optricity is the market-leading slotting optimization tool. We set up all of these sizes, very, very small bins, hand stacks, all the way up to case flow, racking, and then we actually got into high-density storage. So we do the iteration, and we're looking at the A's and B items. And what's interesting here is if you go all the way down to the bottom, today it says they have 312 items that should be picked out of a full pallet location. They've got 120 plus items that should be picked out of a high density storage. That's to minimize replenishment. So currently today, I know for a fact that you don't have 6 deep in his facility, but yet that's how much volume is moving on 6 of their SKUs, which means they are replenishing the snot out of it. So we want to set up for the optimal scenario. So that's the pick side of it, right? High density storage, validate some of the quantities, and make sure we got a solution for that. Now, on the reserve side, again, you've got 190 SKUs, 182, I was told there'd be no math, 182 SKUs that require high density storage. So what's great about this is they're going to be able to shrink their overall footprint. Today in their environment, they got bin shelves, single deep selective rack, and that is it. So now we know you've got 20, 30, 100 pallets of the same SKU on hand. The best way to store that is high density storage. So now we talked about that space. We're going to be able to leverage better space in the facility, minimize the replenishments. So we looked at the reserve storage, and then, so now think about it. We got the order profile, we got the storage type analysis, we know the ideal size and quantity for pick location in the reserve. Now the question is, what's the right level of automation based on this and our results? So Dan's going to talk about how we evaluated the automation.
Okay, so once we leveraged all this data that we got from the SDA results and their order profile, with that we reached out to 4 different goods to person technologies, went to them, came up with 11, we have 11 iterations for Ecentria to evaluate. Each of them has their pros and cons. A lot of them use a lot of the vertical storage, some of them take up a larger footprint. So OPEX, we looked at all of their different SKUs, their A and B SKUs. We even looked at, storing all of their SKUs from the A, B, and C operations for OPEX. We also looked at AutoStore, all their SKUs, setting up an AutoStore, which again, between OPEX, AutoStore, Canap, and I believe the other one was Geek Plus. We took a look at all these. We then presented this to Ecentria, to their team, and to come up with the best ROI. Michael, you want to talk a little bit about
You can talk.
OPEX?
You got it. It's all you.
I'm going to need your help. Come on.
You got it.
I don't. Come on. This is your data.
So I think the key is, for every alternative 1 through alternative 11, we looked at the total cost, the labor savings, the 5-year return on investment, and then at the end of the day, we compared it, right? So for those of you that have not done a mini shuttle, believe it or not, the OPEX unit has 3 different tray sizes, and they have a weight constraint. AutoStore also has different tray sizes, Geek Plus, Canap. So all of them have different trade-offs. Vertical clear height, AutoStore can only do 16 trays, 20 foot. Well, if you're in a 34-foot clear facility, maybe the AutoStore isn't the right answer. Where OPEX, you can go up higher, same thing with Geek Plus and with Canap. So all of them have trade-offs, all of them have different things. But what's interesting is when you compare these alternatives and some of the lessons learned, it's more about that detailed analysis that says, how are you going to pick, and what is the pick vehicle we're going to use? Are we going to do put walls? Are we going to actually have a conveyor that does the takeaway right to a pack station? What about the dunnage when you do replenishment? How are the conveyors going to work? How are you going to take the corrugate away? Those types of things. So when you compared it all, we actually came back with a solution, and the team actually went and made their decision, and now the team's like, okay, great. We're about to go make a significant investment in a goods-to-person solution. Before we do that, where should the DCs be? Or maybe we should build one major distribution center. So we've done the storage type analysis, we've done the automation evaluation, we know what the data is. Now we got to look at our distribution network analysis. And we're going to take it into a couple of accounts. Number 1, overall space. So if I do 1 facility versus 2 facilities. Number 2, I'm going to look at my actual facility operating cost. Number 3, I'm going to look at actually the inbound, outbound transportation. And then number 4, the actual service windows. So all of these are levers and trade-offs that they're gonna actually have to take the data and evaluate how to decide it. So step one, we really wanted to look at, is there a best model, a 1 DC versus a 2 DC model? As we heard already, we've got Aurora, Illinois, and we got Logan, Utah. So step one, what size do we need? So the key here is this. Today, we got 292 in Aurora, and we got 56 in Logan. So we said you need about 350,000 square feet, high volume, back of the napkin, not taking into account a couple of key things. Number one, typically when we build a facility, we're either doing the pack out or the outbound sortation on a mezzanine or on a second level to maximize the clear height in the building. Where underneath, you might be able to do the inbound and the sortation. So we didn't take that into account. So this is just high level numbers, all right? Number two is if we actually were gonna do the 2 DCs, we thought, hey, we do 225 on the East Coast in Aurora, and we do 75 on the West Coast. So now that we know what the space is, let's think about what it's actually gonna cost to operate. So operating costs, we actually looked at exactly if we have today 20,000 SKUs out in Logan, which is the West Coast, and then we looked at what happens if we put 80,000 SKUs out there. The big aha was the cost to run the facility stayed exactly the same, but now instead of 93% of the orders being sourced from a single DC, with 80,000 SKUs, we're able to get 98% of the orders sourced from a single DC. So we knew that there was going to be a trade-off on transportation costs and service, but stocking 20,000 SKUs versus 80,000 SKUs, the operating cost to run the building was negligible. So now we have a choice. Are we going to go with a bigger facility and source more orders out of 1 DC? That's only one side of the equation. So space, one side, operating cost of the building is the other, but really, what's the driver? Transportation costs based on inbound and outbound analysis. So if in the event we had an East Coast DC, AKA Louisville instead of Aurora, and then we had the Logan facility that we had fully stocked, where would the orders ship from? So this is actually a depiction of all other customers, and the one in the blue could be serviced either from the West Coast or the East Coast based on either a distributor order management, cost to serve, speed to value, service level, one of those types of things. So when you look at the single DC cost, we found that we could probably save about $2.6 million if we really located a central DC. We looked at 30 different distribution endpoints. The 2 DC model actually drove about an $8.5 million savings. But if you look at the top line, the best DC, Louisville and Logan, drove about a 9.8 ROI. So now you're actually talking about some significant savings from a transportation perspective. Then if you do a 2 DC model, you'd be able to save about $8.5 million, but keeping in Aurora, your penalty is only about $1.3 million. So that is kind of the bigger picture. Looking at the transit times, you had 2.41 days to service your customers if you were in a single DC, but if you actually went to a 2 DC model, you get to 1.98. So there is a little bit of a service trade-off. So the key part about partnering with Ecentria on this is being able to look at all the different scenarios. That thing about warehousing and transportation, you got a trade-off between location, cost, and service level windows. Okay, now, so Michael, we're saying that we probably are gonna go with a 2 DC model because of the transportation savings. We know that we wanna do that, but what about the SKU affinity? So if I actually take 20,000 SKUs and move it to the West Coast versus 80,000 SKUs to the West Coast, what am I trading off and what am I looking at? So again, in the bottom right, we've got the green and the red, and then the blue is really being able to service from either one. Is there something that really drives what SKUs go to which facility, and how is that gonna impact my overall cost and my service level windows? So here's the overall findings and recommendations. Number one, a 2 DC network with 20,000 SKUs in Logan would probably do a really nice job. We would get 93% of our orders being consolidated, picked, and shipped out of a single DC. But going to a 2DC model with 80,000 SKUs in Logan, now we're going to get 98% of our orders being shipped from a single DC, and we have the transportation savings. So the question would be, the ideal scenario would probably be something to the effect of a 2DC model in Cincinnati and Logan, Utah, but there is only a $1.3 million penalty to keep it in Aurora from a transportation perspective and Logan, but we got to put the 80,000 SKUs over there. So we actually looked at a single DC model, and the savings aren't as incremental as with a 2DC model. So I think the big thing for us is looking at that 2DC model. Whether you do a single DC or a 2DC model, you're probably going to need to spend between 18 and 20 million in overall equipment. So we talked about today, they don't have any high density storage, they don't have any high density picking, and they don't have a goods to person solution. So building the ideal brand new facility, not retrofitting their existing facility they have today, is going to reduce the overall risk to the business. So what we've opted to do is we're actually going to extend the lease in our current building while we find, secure a brand new facility, do the optimal layout, install a goods to person solution, and possibly tweak the current warehouse management system, which is an old version of Red Prairie, and bring this facility live. So I think we've done the data, we've done the analysis, we've made our recommendation. Now the question is, where's the next steps? The next step slide is missing, but I know it, so we'll talk about it. All right, so real quickly, we did the storage type analysis, identified the ideal size and quantity of forward pick location and reserve. So now we've got the nuggets to actually lay it out in the building. We determined that a 2DC network is the right solution. We're going to be able to save between 7.8, 8.9 million in transportation, depending on where the East Coast DC resides. That being said, with the order profile and the goods to person, we were able to identify and select OPEX, high density storage. We're going to go with 3 lanes of it. And now what we're doing is we're working on what we call the detailed analysis. The detailed analysis is how big is the accumulation needed for the replenishment of the OPEX unit? What is the actual pick vehicle? We call it a put to stock or a mobile stocking unit. So what's the ideal? Am I going to have a mobile cart with 20 bays, or am I going to have a mobile cart with 40 bays on both sides, and once one of the bays is done, it goes out and I keep going? So the OPEX will tell you that they can do 300 presentations an hour, but we know that a human can only do about 200 to 220. So we built the business case on 200 presentations an hour, and now we're trying to figure out on a peak day, how many people, how long is it going to go, what's the accumulation, how are we going to waive the orders, how are we going to batch the orders, how are we going to pick those together. And then right now today, we talked about we didn't use the vertical clear height in the building, so we're going to look at the inbound sortation, put a mezzanine deck, and do the outbound sortation and pack out on the second level to maximize the clear height. So with the space savings of about 100,000 square feet, we're actually going to turn our business into a third-party fulfillment center. We're doing e-commerce fulfillment, we made the right investments, and we're going to start to do it. Believe it or not, one of our other customers just signed with the Gap. Yeah, GAP. They built this huge e-commerce facility, and they've got extra bandwidth, so now they're turning themselves into a third-party logistics firm. Why not? Everybody else needs e-commerce services, right? So we've got the infrastructure built, we're doing the detailed design, and then in addition to that, we're talking about a crawl, walk, run strategy. So Patrick and team are already making changes to their bin sizes. We're going to look at taking the Super A's out, maybe put some case flow in that we can relocate to the new building to minimize the replenishments and increase the overall pick velocity. So I'm going to pause there and ask Chris, any big ahas besides the data and some of the analysis we did that you guys uncovered?
Well, it was shocking how bad our weights and dimensions were. We thought our weights and dimensions were a lot better. We have 2 Cubiscans, and we're in the process of measuring everything. We went back to our vendors. We asked them what their weights and dimensions were, and that was even worse than our original data that we had. because when you ask for an each, well, they send you the dimensions for a case or a pack. So we're breaking it down to the each, the pack, the case, the master carton, and once we get all that data in, which we've already seen a huge improvement with our storage, but we still go through the building and our system will route this piece of equipment to a double deep pallet position. So we still have a lot of things to work out, but we also made a lot of changes to our Red Prairie system. I call it bastardizing, but if we could go back to a basic system, I think we'd be better off. But knowing that our weights and dimensions were off, knowing that the size of the locations that we had weren't accurate to the amount of products that we had, I think those were two of the biggest things that really surprised us.
So we talked about how everybody's data isn't that great, but when you start talking about a goods-to-person solution, you really need to understand the bin and the option. So with the OPEX unit, how many totes and trays? With the auto store, how many totes and trays? The Geek Plus. So we've done this now 6 times, and what's amazing is of the 6, 2 went with auto store, 2 went with OPEX, and 1 with Geek Plus. So there isn't a right goods-to-person solution for everybody. It's really based on the order profile, the size of the items, the cube movement, the weight, that you can really maximize it. So I think, for me, the big aha was every time we walk into it, it's coming up with a different solution based on the order profile and the cube movement. So number 1, item dimensional data, get a Cubiscan, get the demand, because if you start batching orders and picking directly into a carton, and you're able to take that carton and ship it out without having to go to a pack station. We had a customer last year, Monet Global, they reduced 42 packers out of 49 packers, right? We have another customer speaking later today, School Specialty. They're picking directly into their outbound box, and they were able to get rid of 26 packers. So cartonization requires item dimensional data picking directly into that outbound carton. Now the challenge with that is if you do have islands of automation. We have another customer that has a VLM, has case flow, pick to light, and has 6 Rivers AMR, and you have islands of automation. Where's the order start? How do you do the order consolidation? How do you do a pick and pass? So Jerry was just in here. I don't see him. I think he left. He's going to speak a little bit later. Crate & Barrel just built a $40 million e-commerce facility right here in Bolingbrook, and they've got 4 level pick-to-light modules. They've got an auto store, and then they've got 32 put walls, and those put walls are right across from the pack station. So everybody's going to challenge and have different levels of automation, and you got to think with the end in mind. So right now, the detailed design is really about building the accumulation and the throughput for peak day and peak season at 70 to 80%, knowing that we're never going to solve for that. You never want to build for it, knowing that you can do overtime for the actual extra. So step 1, item dimensional data. Step 2, we think about a warehouse as 4 assets. Space, we already talked about, we got to use the clear height, and with the automation, we're going to reduce the overall space. Equipment, we didn't have the right equipment, we drove labor and extra replenishments. Labor, struggle every day. Actually, you should tell them what you did to incentivize your people to come in every day. I love it, tell them.
We'll get to that later.
Come
Go
on.
ahead. No, go ahead.
They did a really awesome initiation to get their employees to come in on time, and then they got a bonus if they were there for all 5 days of the week. So, and then the last one is control. So no matter if it's a warehouse control system, a WMS system, there has to be some sort of system that's going to run any of these goods-to-person solutions, and then how does that tie into your receiving, your put away, and your replenishment? So as we're doing the detailed design right now, with the OPEX unit, the accumulation, the replenishment, the inbound volumes, the outbound volumes, and now taking 80,000 SKUs to Logan, we're going to be able to service our customers a lot better and have a lot more customer satisfaction. Dan, what was the big aha for you through this process?
Well, just going there and seeing how they're picking today. They did have that, what do you call them, the wallies out there. So the way they pick today is they basically just have all of their runners out there picking the carts, and they bring it to probably, how many pack tables do you have right now? 42 pack tables. So you got to imagine somebody's running around picking all these orders to their 3-4 level high carts, and then they go around, they drop it off at a pack station. Somebody's then got to take it off of there, It's a lot of hand touches. I mean, they're touching the product way too many times. With the goods, the person brings it right to them. They can pick it, hopefully put it right into their box once they get all the dimensions right. From there, the picker's just picking, putting it into a package, goes down to a pack station. With all this, we can add some other great automation with some inline scales, print and apply. They also have, not everything goes in a box for them, so they have bagger lines. Right now, they pack it at their table and they throw it into a big bin. Somebody's got all their water spiders got to come around, pick it all up, and bring it all there. So bringing all this technology into one place, and then we can kind of pick and choose where we want to put in this other automation and reduce their footprint. And what we talked about especially in their shipping area right now, they have their sorter way off the dock. They're taking up a lot of space. They have a mezzanine that isn't utilized underneath as much as it should be. So what we came up with was putting the sorter over the dock, utilizing as much space as we can, just like we are with the OPEX units, utilizing as much of their vertical storage as possible. I mean, they're pretty manual right now. I mean, they tried to go into some automation, but I just don't think they were there yet with their data.
Anything you want to add, Chris?
Yeah, so he just paints a really depressing picture of my building right now. But so there's a story behind it. The building that we're currently in, it used to be a 3PL provider. The owners of Ecentria got a phone call on a Monday from the owners of the 3PL company saying that they were going bankrupt and the bank was locking the doors on Friday. So the owners of my company bought them out, and we've slowly transitioned it just to our building. We still have one other 3PL person in there. So we inherited the conveyor, we inherited the rack. None of it was appropriate to what our needs were. So we moved a lot of rack down, made it narrow aisle, VNA, very narrow aisle, wire guided, which we've doubled our picks out of there. We got rid of the robots. We shrunk that whole pick module down. We decreased the aisle space, so those picks increased. We built some double deep storage for our bulky items and kind of rearranged the building. We took some of the conveyor out. So we are much better than we were 2 years ago of what Dan was speaking about.
Yes.
But what's great is we're looking at land now, and we're going to be able to start from scratch. And we have discussions where we don't always agree, but it makes you think more about what you really need. If we were to design it right now and decide now, I don't know if it would be as perfect as it will be, because we still have another year to tweak it and play around. We're thinking about trying an automated, we receive over 1,000 cartons every day inbound through UPS and a couple hundred through FedEx. We want to try an automated motion scale and have them automatically scan and sort. And I talking to them last night, I want it permanent, but I want to take it with. So can you figure it out? And they're like, well, we have to anchor the scale. I go, fine, that's it, but nothing else. So we have time to really tweak things and do it right. And that's why this is so exciting. As depressing as it is currently and how long it still may take, I know in 3 years from now we're going to have one of the perfect buildings. It's going to be awesome, and it's going to reduce our staff. So to Mike's point, I didn't want to talk about it because I still miss those days where people just woke up and showed up to work on time and worked every day, and they didn't have to be rewarded. So we did have to do some creative things when it was through COVID, because we never shut down. We had to work every day. These people had to come in every day while people worked from home. So hats off to the employees, but we really also created a solid team in the Aurora and our Logan buildings. And we've decreased our headcount dramatically. Our productivity's gone way up, even with the warehouse that we currently have. We're going to talk later. But I'm looking forward to this opportunity, and we've had really good conversations. And now everything that we do in the building, we look at saving seconds, because we ship 20,000 cartons out a day. If I could save a second or 5 seconds on every one of those cartons, that could equal 4, 5, 6 head count per year. So,
absolutely.
Yeah.
All right, we're getting towards the end. I'm going to open up for Q&A. Any questions out there in the audience?
Where'd my water go?
Let's grab one.
If not,
I probably used
yeah,
it.
go ahead. How long did it take to do the Cubiscan conventional data? If you put 2 people on it full time for a week, you should get 4,500 items.
We're not done yet.
He didn't give me 2 people for full time.
But we bought 2 units.
There you go. All right, if not, let's thank Chris for giving us time and attention. Enjoy the rest of your ProMat show.